Okay, hi everyone. So I'm Sarah Martin, the Communications and Engagement Officer at the Corangamite CMA, and I'll be presenting with my colleague Sharon Blum-Caon, who is the Senior Estuaries and Environmental Water Officer. So we're part of a team of about 45 who work in beautiful southwest Victoria across a wide range of projects, but one of the key responsibilities we have is delivery of water for the environment on behalf of the Victorian Environmental Water Holder in our inland rivers, the Moorabool River and the Barwon River. So delivering water for the environment requires careful planning and a lot of data, which can be a challenge to communicate to the public in an engaging way. So I'll hand over to Sharon now, who's going to talk through our environmental water systems.
Thanks, Sarah. So yeah, just a quick overview of the systems we manage. So in the Corangamite region, we've got the whole Barwon River system basin. So the Barwon River coming down through the Otways from the West Barwon Reservoir down through Geelong and coming through the lower Barwon wetlands there before it empties into the sea at Barwon Heads. And feeding into that, we also have the Moorabool River and the Yarrawee Lee. So we have three environmental entitlements. The first one on the Moorabool is held at Lau Reservoir. So we have a low confidence in water availability on the Moorabool. It's a very flow stress system. The environmental entitlement only allows for about a quarter of ecological needs. So we rely heavily on water transfers from Lau to Sheoaks by Barwon Water. And we have a bit of a problem area down at Batesford near Geelong where the Moorabool River was actually rerouted around the Batesford Quarry through a concrete channel, and the old section of that's broken up and we lose a lot of surface water to ground in that area and have loss of flow and sometimes need to do fish rescues. So that's the Moorabool. The Barwon has a lot more reliability of flow, particularly through winter and spring, but still a highly flow stress system. We only have 1 gigalitre of environmental water on that system, and it requires 29 gig to get back to 75% of natural flow. So just to give you an idea of the scale of things. And we have quite a few issues up high on the Barwon with weed infestations from willows and glyceria. So we really need to do sort of complementary works of getting more water and clearing out those weeds and maybe still having some floodplain connection if we can get agreements in place to keep that channel form and allow us to get water down to the really flow stressed regions, which are sort of from Winchelsea through to Geelong. So in the past, that river's also stopped flowing before it gets to Geelong, and we can have blue-green algae outbreaks in Geelong. South of Geelong at the lower Barwon wetlands, that's quite an interesting entitlement because it's not held in a reservoir. The water comes in and out of the river, and we use that water to wet and dry Reedy Lake and Hospital Swamps. It's a very contentious area with a difficult stakeholder group. We have hunting community, we have licensed eel fishers, we have Geelong field gnats, birdos, etc. So yeah, it's quite a difficult space to work within. It's a Ramsar listed wetland and a game reserve. So that one's good fun. So that's just a little bit of an overview of the system. So I might go on to the next slide. Thanks, Sarah. So in terms of communicating what we do, in the past, it's been sort of on an ads needs basis, a little bit, I guess, on the ad hoc side. So we've done email notifications with our advisory committees. We've got one per system. We obviously work with those people on seasonal watering proposals as well and rely on them to communicate back out to their communities. We've recently broadened our notification system to just anyone who's interested. Obviously, you get the random phone calls. If you're in a CMA, I'm sure everyone gets them. Is, my property's flooding, is that you or is that the river doing its natural thing? Yeah, so a fairly ad hoc approach, I suppose. Systematic in terms of when we notify the releases, but a little bit piecemeal. The comms and engagement team also have had a role in communication and obviously still do. Social media. That works quite well on the Moorabool and the upper Barwon, but is problematic in the lower Barwon because of the stakeholder group down there, and we often end up just getting trolled. Media releases are good, but can get held up fairly significantly through the approval process in DELP, so maybe aren't really relevant by the time they are due for release. And of course, website news. So that's kind of how we did it in the past. Play the next slide. Thanks, Sarah. We really wanted to get a more systematic real-time tool in place that the community could easily access a first port of call before they rang us, and a tool that increased transparency and trust, as well as reducing the load on staff. So on our wish list, we wanted data that was easy to maintain, so just Excel or CSV files, photographs. We wanted a visual context to the tool so that the community could easily sort of swoop into their area visually and see the rivers in the landscape. We wanted to be able to display more data than just flows, so that again, community could start to get a feel for, well, if my flows are really low going past my farm, what does that mean in terms of dissolved oxygen, salinity? Start to get a feel for how those parameters interact. I mentioned the trust and data transparency, so it's not just Sharon saying, hey, it's 5 megalitres a day. They're actually drilling into the source data of the gauges. It's accessible anytime, so if it's 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night or Sunday afternoon, they can still access the information. And we wanted the data display to be interactive and fun to use. So it is that. You can get in there and sort of create your own graphs, play around with the data, date ranges, that kind of thing. So, yeah, so that was our wish list. And I think, you know, one of the benefits is going to be, particularly on a system, say, like the Barwon, in summer, you know, it's very slow stressed, and the community be able to see a release at the West Barwon Reservoir and see how it plays out down the river, how long it takes to get to Birragah or Winchelsea, how that flow's attenuated on the way down, and then compare that to flowing winter, where the river's naturally gaining, and start to get a feel for how their rivers and the environmental entitlements actually work in the landscape. Next slide. I think that's back to you, Sarah.
So this is back to me. So we will jump into the tool in a minute, but I just want to quickly run through the data sets that are used in the tool. And thank you to Alice and Christian from Discovery Eye, who created this diagram and created the tool for us over the last 6 to 9 months. So the key thing here is that there's several types and sources of data. So we've got permanent data. So that is the illustrated maps that we had created by a graphic designer. So they can be updated at any time, but they are static on the system. We have gauge IDs and locations, also have site photos at some of the sites. And the idea is to illustrate the changes in the rivers from season to season and in different flow states. And all of the static data can be updated by the Corangamite CMA at any time through a back-end process, but it is a manual process. Then we also have the refreshed data sources. So that is, so we have data from WMIS, which is the Victorian Government's Water Measurement Information System. So this is a fantastic site with all of the surface water and groundwater gauges throughout the state. It's publicly accessible to anyone, and our staff use it a lot in decision making and planning. And so the data from WMIS is collected, refreshed several times a day in the tool, and that's all automatic. And then we also have data that is maintained by the Corangamite CMA in terms of our releases of water for the environment, and that is something that we maintain in a CSV file and update on a regular basis, about once a month. So we'll jump into the tool. So we have a WordPress website at the CMA. So this tool has been created as a WordPress plugin. So there is a gallery of maps. So we have the Upper Barwon, the Lower Barwon wetlands, which we'll go into that. So we've got 2 river systems and 1 wetland system, slightly different, managed slightly differently, which Sharon will talk about. We have the Moorabool River. And then we also have the Yarrawee Lee, which we don't deliver water from the environment down, but we have some gauges on those rivers. So I'll jump into the Moorabool, because we are releasing some water from the environment right now in this system. So it'll be great to see how that interacts in the data. So I'll go to the Morrison's gauge. So any of these icons here people can click on, and they're all live. There's also some data at the reservoir. So this is passing flow rules, which is maintained by the water agencies. So we'll go into the Morrison's gauge. So the data here is coming from two different sources. So we have the water level, stream flow, salinity and temperatures all coming from WMS. And then we have our water for the environment, which is coming from the Corangamite CMA data set. So click on more information and we'll bring up the full window. So this is really the bulk of the information that you can access. So we've got the summary is up here again, and now we can click through different aspects of the data. So the default is water for the environment and stream flow. So stream flow coming from the WMS website and water for the environment coming from the Corangamite CMA data, and the default setting is set at 3 months. So that's a nice range period to see what's happening in the system. And we can also zoom in on certain sections to really see what's happening. So this was a fresh, Sharon, a winter fresh.
Yep.
Just trying to bring up. Yep, so that was at 40 megalitres a day, winter fresh, and then you can see the stream flow. So you can see both sets of data at the same time. So we can customise this data range to pretty much anything you like. There are some limitations just to not put too much of a load on the WMS website. So if you wanted to look at periods of, say, 5 years at a time, you'd go to the WMS website for that. But I'll bring up the last 3 months and the planned 3 months. So Sharon's just updated this data today. So let's move that over here. So we can see what's been happening recently, and then also the planned environmental releases. So they're a different colour to indicate that they haven't happened yet. But that's really exciting for the community. They can access all this information before the tool, but now it's all in the one place. So that's what makes it really exciting. So the Upper Barwon and the Moorabool River are both river systems. We're releasing water from water storages. The Lower Barwon wetlands is a bit different. So we'll navigate to that. And I'll click on Hospital Swamps gauge. And sometimes the data just takes a little while to load, but it's really quite quick. And Sharon, if you wanted to explain about watering actions, I'll go to 12 months.
12 months, yeah. So at the Lower Barwon wetlands, we're not measuring flow like we are in the Moorabool and Barwon. We're measuring the height of the wetlands because we're implementing a wetting and drying regime at the wetlands most years. So at Hospital Swamps here, you can see the water levels going up and down. It's only a small change at Hospital Swamps, so I would have liked to have shown you Reedy, except we kept it full this year, so there was nothing to show really. But full is about 0.5, and then you can see it dropping down to about, 0.3, 0.2 something, which is pretty much the outlets open and it's exchanging tidally with Lake Connewarre. And then you can see us making adjustments on the regulators and the level coming up around 0.5 again. So each of those little dots along there is a watering action. So the community can see when we went down and made an adjustment and whether we were adjusting, the water up or down. And if you go back to sort of August 19, Sarah, everybody can sort of see that little peak there. So that's interesting and gives everything a bit of context. That'll be a little localized, flood event from the local urban development. So Warralilly and Armstrong Creek. We have very little control over the levels in Hospital Swamps when the stormwater runoff comes off those new developments, and we're working closely with City of Greater Geelong to mitigate that so that the watering regime of Hospital Swamps isn't affected to the same extent. But that's great, a great graph. You can see that event there, as well as our planned actions and how the event has or hasn't affected our watering plans for the year. So so that's a good one. Again, you can sort of see, particularly at the wetlands, it's, people are generally interested in the salinity and oxygen levels as well. because that's the ecology we're trying to achieve there.
I'll just add in those extra graphs. So the release of water for the environment and water levels or stream flow would be the top graph, and then we also have, if we tick some of those other boxes there, so we can click them on and off. So we'll just look at conductivity and dissolved oxygen, and so this is loading from WMIS. There's nothing there. Oh, there we go. Just takes it. So it's gone back. So it stayed on the 12 months. So we can do custom. Let's look at 3 months. So yeah, so not all of the gauges have the same data. So it really depends on the gauge. But all of the data that we access is in the tool for people to have a play around with.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing I will mention with the river systems, I'll just go back to Memorable and have a look at water for the environment and stream flow again, is that the green shaded area is the data that Sharon enters into our CS file, as in that's the releases from the water storage. So whereas the blue shaded area is the stream flow, the amount of stream flow at the gauge site. So we will talk about this with the community, but it's really important that there is, it doesn't measure the amount of water from the environment at the stream gauge site. It's the water that was released from the water storage. But you can definitely see, what's exciting is you can really see the trends in the data reflected in what's happening in the river.
That's right. And if we pulled up the Batesford gauge, then you'd see that peak coming through later than it does at Morrison's.
Yep, I'll pull that up quickly. So this one has a lot less data. We don't have the dissolved oxygen and temperature and salinity on this one. But yeah, there's quite a difference there with the...
You can see the separated peaks, and you can also see that the peak's a bit higher because the base flow is higher from natural flows further down the system. Because it was winter. It'd be different if it was summer.
So yeah, so we're really excited by this data, as you can see. So I'll go back to presentation. And that tool is now live for anyone to have an explore. So what are we doing next? Well, we love doing the e-water map so much that we're going to do it for our estuaries as well. So we have slightly different data in the estuaries, but it's also data gauges from WMIS. So we'll be working on that tool with Discovery Eye in the next couple of weeks to months. And that's it. Got time for questions, or maybe at the end?
Yep, that's great. Thank you both, Sarah and Sharon. That was wonderful. I actually had a look at the website the other day and went into the tool itself as well, so I thought it was really fantastic. So we do have some questions here. I'll just have a look now. So our first one is from Kristen. Fantastic presentation, thank you. Is there any opportunity to incorporate citizen science collected water quality data, such as from WaterWatch and Estuary Watch data portals? I think you did have a point on that on your second last slide there.
With the estuaries. Yeah, so that is definitely something we're going to look into. The data sources at the moment we've got from WMIS, from CCMA, and some static data sets. So incorporating the Estuary Watch data would be a further iteration of the tool, but it's definitely something we'd like to look at, for sure.
That's great. I was actually thinking the same thing in terms of that, as well as like using maybe even Atlas, where you have your community observations where they're verified and uploaded, linked into that. And then I saw that you also have the Fluker Post one, which was the other one I was thinking about. That's great. That'll be interesting to see how it develops into the future. I've got a question here from Jess. Does the tool scrape data from the WMIS website, or is it connected to the WMIS database directly?
That's a good question. And is Christian on the line? He might be better to explain how it all works in the back end.
Yeah, so I can jump in. So it makes use of the publicly available WMIS API to extract data from the databases. So we've just got that, the API configured for the gauges that we want, for the variables that we want, and for the different intervals. And so we extract that live real-time data coming through to our tool through the API.
That's great, thank you. Lachlan here has got, does it require much maintenance?
I would say no. Sharon, you update the data once a month. We will be adding some new gauge sites in the next couple of months, and I think it's a relatively straightforward process. I think it's a really elegant solution that Discovery AI has put together that through a WordPress plugin we can update a lot of things in the back end. We haven't needed to yet, we've only just launched it, but I think it's quite an elegant and simple data solution.
Yeah, and the updating task is really quick and easy, a couple of minutes.
Awesome, thank you guys. I'll wrap it up with this sort of combination of questions and put them all together. So I've got a few from Jennifer, Paul and Louise, and I'm just going to merge. So what sort of information are you going to show on the estuary set? Will you be able to show closures, oxygen levels that might impact opening and fish kills? And then following on from that, just what sort of other features have the public liked the most, or if they have been exposed to it so far? And also who designed the catchment maps?
Okay, I'll start with who designed the catchment maps was Evolution Design in Geelong, and they did a beautiful job. We're really happy with them, and I think it just adds to the tool so much. Second question was about what's happening in the estuaries. So the estuary map is still under development, so there will be WMIS data in there. What other data we have not resolved yet, but we'll be working on that in the next couple of weeks. And what was there was another question in there.
And just what features have the public liked the most, if you've had any responses?
So we launched this tool, we made this tool live on Friday, as in last Friday. So we haven't launched it to the public yet. So we'll be really excited to run some more webinars and Q&As and sessions with the public to get their feedback, what they like about the tool, what they might like to see in a future iteration. So that'll be something really exciting over the next couple of weeks and months.
That's awesome. Okay. Well, with that, thank you again, Sarah and Sharon, for that presentation. That was really great to listen to and to see and to have a look at the tool and how it's transformed the way that you guys display your data and engage with your community. So it'll be good.